Your station, your voice.
From East End to Georgetown, down into West Bay.
All things Cayman. One radio, many people. This is home.
Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.
Live from Radio Cayman Studio, this is
Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community.
A very good morning and warm welcome to Money Sense. I'm Simon Cawdery and I'm delighted to be joined by Michael Gayle in the studio this morning. Michael is the CEO of the Cayman Islands National Insurance Company, often referred to as Cinico, an organisation that was founded in 2004, and Michael is also a board member of the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility. There's a few acronyms we've thrown there. First of all, warm welcome to you, Michael, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Simon. Delighted to be here.
Now, one of the principal reasons we asked you to join us this morning is to discuss parametric insurance. Now, at 7:30 in the morning, the word parametric fills perhaps some people with a bit of dread and fear. So before we get into what could be a statistical conversation, I jest slightly, I think it might be helpful just to ask you to give a brief history lesson almost of what is Cinico, why did it come into being, who's it for, etc., because it's something that we're all sort of familiar with, but unless we see it in our day-to-day lives, we kind of don't perhaps know enough about it, I suspect. So perhaps you could give us a little history on that.
So Cinico was brought into being 20 years ago with a view towards trying to bring some order and structure to the administration of the government's health insurance expenditure. In the past, the government had bought health insurance from private carriers, and there were issues with it. And Cinico was then brought into being to fill that void. So technically speaking, our main purpose is to provide health insurance coverage for core government employees and their beneficiaries and pensioners, and some what referred to as government adjacent entities. For example, we provide coverage for the seafarers and veterans, because even though they're not technically, they are very significant in terms of the country's history and culture. Mm-hmm. So the government provides them with assistance by facilitating insurance through Cinico. And we also administer on the government's behalf a health coverage program on administrative service only basis for there is a cadre of indigent who cannot afford insurance, and the government provides coverage for them. We administer that on their behalf.
And you've been with Cinico, if memory serves, for about 5 years or so.
5 years next week.
You've not previously, before this role, been in the what I'm going to call the public sector as such. You've been previously in the private sector. What motivated you to make the switch into what can have some, you read the papers sometimes and people say, government deficits, things aren't going well. You're often in the public eye more than you might be in the private sector.
So I've been in the insurance industry for close to 45 years and in the private sector for most of those years. What I have found, Simon, in going to Cinico is that for the first time, I have a sense of purpose in terms of what we're doing. I'm not just doing something to put profit into the pockets of shareholders. Myself and my team were all committed to doing something which makes a difference in the lives of our people here in the Cayman Islands. And this provides for us a tremendous sense of satisfaction.
How do you measure the success then of the organisation? Because the comparator, I suppose, is 20 years ago what it was, and that's a long time ago to measure. So how do you as an organisation ascribe value, or not ascribe, but how do you monitor the value, and how do you monitor how successful you are doing as an organisation?
We don't actually have a mechanism for monitoring it. We are very much in the public's eye, mm-hmm. And one of the ways that we are able to sort of monitor it is the amount of complaints that I get as CEO. And I'm happy to be able to say that I do not get very many complaints. I do get satisfied people. There are complaints, of course, because
it's very dangerous saying live on air you don't get many complaints.
Well,
there's going to be everyone writing.
Yeah, so the reality is that not everything always goes as people expect them to. Some of that is as a result of having incorrect expectations. Some of it is as a result of things happening external. For example, there are people who will get medical treatment somewhere and aren't satisfied with the treatment that they get. They knock on our door even though we have nothing to do with it. A lot of the complaints that I get are really as a result of things which have nothing to do with Cinico's operations per se. Right. But that's what we're here for. We're here to hold people's hands and try to help them navigate the process.
And risk management then, one of the things I read in the paper, the government came out with its budgetary report, and it has a variety of assets, a variety of liabilities. Is it correct in saying that the government ultimately underwrites the liabilities or the insurance products and the costs of those? Explain that to me, because perhaps that concept is slightly less well understood by the general public.
It's an interesting question, and in fact it leads me into being able to make a particular clarification. There is a perception in the public domain that every year the government has to be pumping money into Cinico, and therefore Cinico is a loss-making entity. That's not at all accurate. There was a time in the past when there were some issues in terms of coordinating the budget between Cinico and core government, where there was a need for some capital injections, but that ended maybe 6 years ago. Certainly in the 5 years that I've been there, the government has not had to inject any capital into Cinico other than to fund the expansion project that we're on now. Every year, we end up in Parliament where there is a debate for some funding for money to be sent to Cinico. But what this really is, I mentioned earlier that we administer on behalf of the government a coverage program for the indigent segment of the population. So when we end up in Parliament and in the newspapers or in the media, you see money being given to Cinico. What this really is we're being reimbursed for funding which we have advanced in the administration of that portfolio on behalf of the Ministry of Health. And
does Cinico then reinsure certain risks?
Oh, absolutely. We carry reinsurance. We carry a lot of reinsurance. In the past, for example, there have been instances in the past where on a year-to-year basis, we have been unprofitable. I'm pleased to say that certainly since I've been there for the past 5 years, we have been more profitable than in some instances originally contemplated, to the point where we have been able to effectively return some of that excess profit, for want of a better phrase, to the government by a number of different mechanisms.
And how many people work at Cinico now then? And maybe just discuss some of the products. We're going to come into some of the new products that you are planning on launching. But Cinico isn't just a health insurance company. It started out that way. But just maybe talk to us a little bit more about that.
So technically we were just an insurance company until March of this year. Okay. About 2 years ago, the then Minister of Finance and Deputy Premier, Minister Chris Saunders, asked us to expand the scope of our operations. Our core operations have always been the provision of a health insurance coverage product for the government workers, the particular cadre that I had mentioned earlier, in addition to which we offer the standard health insurance contract, which is the basic insurance package that all Class A insurance companies are obliged to offer. We were asked to do a number of things. We were asked to develop a product which is an improvement on the SHIC, which we are in the process of developing and hope to have ready for the open market before the end of this year. We were asked to go into property and casualty insurance, and we have developed a motor product which was launched in March, and a homeowners product which was launched this month. So we are spreading our wings somewhat with a view towards being a broader based insurance company than just the government captive, as it were, at the beginning.
Slightly off topic in a sense, but one of my long cherished hopes for this island would be that we have a single insurance product or single insurance provider, maybe subject to tender, but the diversity of insurance companies, meaning that the ability to get price competitive because of the buying power. I go to an insurance company as a firm of 5 people and I can't get any negotiation room. We go to an insurance company as an island of 80,000 people and we potentially have much more scope to negotiate favourable terms and offer a wider range of products. Maybe that's something Cinico could be associated with one day, right?
That's above my pay grade. That is a whole different debate, and I don't think I'm in a position to contribute to that particular debate.
Fair. Now, you mentioned, though, that you're moving on to this month, as it happened, into property insurance. Now, perhaps before we go down to what that means, it might be worthwhile spending a few moments talking about your role with the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, because that gives some of the history and context as to what you're actually offering now. It's a similar sort of product type. So perhaps just talk, maybe spend a moment saying what is the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, etc.
So let's go back 20 years to Hurricane Ivan.
I'd rather we didn't, but go on, yes.
Well, that's the genesis of CRIF. Hurricane Ivan did significant damage to a number of countries in the region, particularly Cayman, Jamaica, and Grenada. And as a result of that, the regional governments recognized that there was need for some additional insurance which is not currently available, or which was not then available in the open market. So a group came together with, I think, 16 of the regional governments as initial backers, with support from the World Bank, the EU, a number of international donor organizations, and CRIF was formed. Now, what CRIF does is we provide a quick capital injection in the aftermath of a disaster, and it's based on what is known as parametric insurance. Conventional insurance would be referred to as indemnity insurance, and under an indemnity insurance product, when you have damage, you have to get an estimate in terms of what it's going to cost to repair or replace. Then it has to be checked and double-checked, and that process takes months. Yeah. But in the meantime, in the aftermath of an event, governments need money to help people who are suffering, to fix roads, to repair their buildings, to do a lot of things which were required to be done in the short term, but which was not budgeted, and therefore there's no cash for it. So what CRIF does, parametric insurance responds to parameters which are, shall we say, numerical, measurable criteria which will trigger a payment.
Undisputable things, as opposed to a surveyor coming to your house and saying, that looks fine, and you going, it's falling down.
Yep.
There's ambiguity. Well, that might be an extreme, but there's ambiguity as to what's the true answer. You're saying if a wind speed is 100 miles an hour, it's 100 miles an hour.
Exactly.
It can't be disputed.
Exactly. So the parameters tend to be sustained wind speed and proximity to a particular territory. So what CRIF does is we have models made in terms of the exposures in all of the various territories, and based on those models, the countries will buy a certain amount of parametric insurance, and their ability to claim on it depends on how much they buy and how far down they buy. So if you buy, for example, at the level of a Category 1 or a Category 2 storm, you're more likely to recover than for a Category 3 or a Category 4. But the lower down you buy, the more expensive it becomes. So it becomes a matter of territories evaluating the cost and the benefit and determining what they can afford to buy.
I guess the challenge with something like that is you can get a lot of damage from a storm that is half a mile an hour lower than a Category 1. You've bought your Category 1, or it's 1 mile away further, but you don't get any payout because of that. But equally, that's the nature of the beast, isn't it? And it's part of the understanding process. So if someone goes in and buys, or a country goes in and buys, expecting always to be paid out, then that's naive to think so. It's by definition based on factual numbers.
It is, and that is the challenge. The flip side of that, of course, is that you can have a situation where you are a half a mile within the radius and you suffer no damage, but you get a payout anyway. So it's not a perfect system, Simon. It's a system which we're currently reviewing. We are always reviewing and trying to improve. But what it does, it provides No, first of all, it's not a replacement for indemnity insurance. It's not going to provide coverage for all the damage, but it provides the governments with a quick injection of funds which will help them to meet the immediate consequences.
Sort of emergency relief type of situation.
Precisely.
Well, look, I think we'll take a short break. We're right on halfway, and then we'll continue our conversation on parametric, give everyone a chance to have a coffee, stimulate themselves, caffeinate before we get into the statistics of things.
Hi, I'm Kathy Miller. Join me on Radio Cayman's Business Buzz every Tuesday and Thursday from 7:30 to 9 a.m. and the second and fourth Thursday of each month from 8:15 to 9 a.m.
Radio Cayman's Business Buzz.
If you're a business owner
or part of one, Business Buzz is your source for the latest initiatives, developments, and varied viewpoints from the local business landscape. Be part of the Business Buzz with me, Kathy Miller, every Tuesday and Thursday morning on Radio Cayman.
The Business Buzz. This is
Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community. Brought to you by the CFA Society Cayman Islands.
And now, more Money Sense.
Welcome back to Money Sense. For those who joined the first half of the show, we discussed some of the history and background of Cinico, the Cayman Islands national insurance company. We started to touch on parametric risk in parametric insurance. We didn't yet go into the meat of it. But we talked about the fact that there is this entity called the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, which I'm going to shorten to CRIF because you did. So I think that's acceptable to do so. It's an entity that's existed for, 18, 20 years? 17 years. For quite remarkably, it was one of the very first vehicles such as this, pan-country, multi-country vehicles to exist, wasn't it? And so there have been others that have...
I'll need to correct you, Sam.
Okay.
It wasn't one of the first, it was the first.
Oh, there you go.
And it remains the standard bearer. It has been copied in some way, shape or form. In Africa, there's an entity in Africa called the African Risk Capacity, which is also an African regional risk pool. There's one in Southeast Asia and there's one in the Pacific. But CRIF is the standard bearer.
One of as I listen to you explain these parameters, why they are the primary, and well, not primary, they're the sole judge of whether someone gets paid out. So it takes emotions, it takes politics, it takes away, someone saying, oh, Cayman's not worthy of this, or Jamaica's not worthy, or Trinidad. It takes away the politics, which can be a little fractious in the Caribbean at times, but it becomes very much a mathematical answer. Did this happen? That results in a payout or not?
Correct.
And how do you find, sitting on the board of CRIF then, as you start to give payouts, are governments receptive to that? I mean, they've all continued to participate, I suppose, so it must suggest that there's a level of happiness with it.
Generally speaking, there are sometimes uncomfortable conversations when a particular country suffers some damage which is not sufficient to trigger their payment. It leads to some uncomfortable conversations, but it's a work in progress, and we work through those, and we still retain traditional support from the traditional participants, in addition to which we also have, I think, about 4 countries from Central America.
I guess one of the things that a country, if a country is buying this sort of product, they've got to take into account their own building codes, their own situation. So a Category 1 might cause a lot more damage in one country versus another, and so that's where you decide what it is you want to buy, correct? And
it's a question of balancing cost and ability to pay. Mm-hmm. The more coverage you buy, the greater your possibilities of getting a payout, but the more it's going to cost you.
Now, so that's the history of parametric insurance, or a brief history of parametric insurance. You introduced this for individuals or households in Cayman, I should say.
Correct.
What was the reason you introduced parametric insurance as opposed to indemnity insurance?
Well, we do offer indemnity insurance, but one of the commitments that we have given in going into the property and casualty insurance space from Cinico is to try to drive innovation in the industry. The products which are available are pretty much the same from one company to the next, not only in Cayman but across the region. And we are committed to pushing the envelope. We are introducing this parametric product, which I'll go into in a little more detail shortly. We are not under any illusion that we are the only company that can do this. We fully expect other companies to follow in due course. And we're quite happy with that because we're a government-owned company. And if we raise the bar and other companies follow, then the entire country benefits, not just our own policyholders. So we're quite comfortable with that.
So when you guys were in your boardroom and thinking up, this is the product we're going to launch, did you have a picture in your mind as to the consumer and how what sort of consumer would buy this and how it would benefit them? I'm trying to put my mind in the people who are listening, go, am I the right person for this? And how do I know if I'm the right person to buy this product?
Maybe I should explain to you how it works first of all. And there's a caveat. We are, as it currently is formulated, we are hoping to bundle it as a standard part of our homeowners product. I want to, at this point, say special thanks to SEMA, the regulators who have been in dialogue with us. They are suggesting an alternative way of doing it, which we are in the process of debating with them. Mm-hmm. So what I'm going to describe is what we currently have on the table, which may or may not be tweaked somewhat depending on our discussions with SEMA. So what we are offering is effectively a small amount of coverage to provide payment for things which you wouldn't normally get in an insurance event. So, for example, let's say you have a house which is insured for $500,000. The parameters for our product, there are two parameters. One is sustained wind speed, and the other is proximity. Let me deal with the proximity one first. There are two circles, a circle of a 45-mile radius around Grand Cayman and a 30-mile radius around the sister islands. The center of the storm has to pass within that circle. The second one is wind speed. It has to be a wind speed of at least 111 miles per hour to trigger it. Those are the two.
And how's that measured? Is it measured by
National Hurricane Center?
Okay.
The National Hurricane Center tracks, the movement and the sustained wind speeds of all storms. So
you're not relying on someone's roof, a little wind on it. Okay.
No. It's not that we don't have confidence in the local entity's ability to provide the information. Excuse me. But for it to provide,
so if you're saying consistency.
In order to provide this, we have reinsurance from one of the largest reinsurance companies in the world. So the first point there is that there is no exposure for the government. It's fully reinsured. For their comfort, they require an entity with a long and established track record in doing this from a credibility point of view. So this takes any emotive issues or any bias out of the equation.
Makes sense.
So for example, Hurricane Beryl, which just passed, was 7 miles outside of that radius, so it wouldn't have triggered.
Irrespective of the wind speed.
Irrespective of the wind speed. But if Hurricane Beryl had been 7 miles further or closer in, regardless of the wind speed on Grand Cayman, Hurricane Beryl passes at about 120 miles per hour, but just outside the radius. If it had been 7 miles further in, everybody who had the cover with us would have gotten a payout. Mm-hmm. So if you have a house of a value of $500,000 and a storm of 115, 120 miles per hour passes within that radius, you're getting $1,000 from us. What is that $1,000 for? We have always recognized that in a catastrophe scenario or a potential catastrophe scenario, consumers are faced with additional expenses, whether they suffer damage or not. Mm-hmm. You have a hurricane coming up. There are long lines at the supermarket, at the hardware stores. People are, buying supplies. They're buying things to batten down the hatches at home. And or there may be a situation where they have to clean up their yards or do minor repairs after, which are not covered by insurance.
Or if they are, they're within the deductible.
Within the deductible.
Not getting any money anyway.
Within the deductible.
And there's no deductible associated with a parametric.
No. So the scale of payments varies with the wind speed. So using the hypothetical I just gave you, it ranges from $1,000 for a Cat 3 up to a maximum of $5,000 for a Cat 5.
And when you say a maximum of 5, is that because of the $500,000 property value? Does it scale with property value?
It's scaled with property values.
Okay.
It's scaled with, the maximum is equivalent to roughly 1% of the sum insured.
Okay.
And then the actual amount of the payout is a percentage of that 1% depending on the wind speed. There's a graduated scale.
Would it be, perhaps I'm oversimplifying and tell me if I am, but would it be fair to almost characterize this as a way of helping fund the deductible that you have to otherwise pay? So you have a disaster, you have to put the first $5,000 up yourself, and this helps you with that because the first $5,000 is the very likely stuff you have to spend. It might be you've got to call someone out to remove a tree because you've got to call someone out to fix your electricity supply or whatever it is. Is it kind of like that in a sense?
It can be. It can be used to help fund some of the shortfall resulting from the deductible, quite so.
And is it only for only for houses? It's not for companies, for business continuity insurance? So companies suffer the same sort of...
Yeah, not at the moment. We're just introducing it. It's a new product, and like yourself, Simon, a lot of people are asking questions.
Yeah.
So we are conservative by nature, and we are introducing it with a view towards possibly expanding the offerings over time. But we're taking small steps rather than big steps.
Fair enough. Insurance, I guess you'd want your insurance people to be conservative by nature.
Naturally.
And you did say, just to be unambiguously clear, I think I heard you say that this is all the risk associated with this is reinsured out.
100%.
So if the absolute worst happened and everyone on the island had bought this product and you had to pay out because of a large storm, you've reinsured it, so someone else is paying that.
Yeah.
Back to you.
So we monitor it. Mm-hmm. So there is a finite amount in terms of how much we can sell. And it is related to the size of our homeowners portfolio. Now, at the moment, we can cover all of the homeowners policies that we can offer coverage on.
It's only available to people who have homeowner coverage through Cinico then?
At the moment.
Okay,
at the moment. But we're looking at expanding that in due course.
So theoretically, it's possible for you to offer parametric insurance to myself if my home insurance policy is with Island Heritage, let's say.
Correct.
That's theoretically possible, and vice versa, I suppose.
In the future.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when someone's looking at this, they say, okay, you're reinsured. How do they get evidence of who you're reinsured? Because a lot of insurance companies, they're good and they're bad, aren't they? Reinsurance companies. So how do you give reassurance to people that you've reinsured with the good quality reinsurers versus the bad ones, I suppose?
We're happy to share that information. We reinsure with the top reinsurance companies in the world. I can give you some of the names. We reinsure between our health portfolio and our property and casualty portfolio. We reinsure with the likes of Munich Re, which is the largest reinsurance company in the world, Swiss Re, which is the second largest, Hanover Re, which I think is the third largest. All of the usual suspects, we have them on our various aspects of our portfolios.
Now, we've got only about a minute left in the show. Time always runs too quickly on the show. Are there any insurance products or are there any changes or future developments in the insurance industry you'd like to see, you'd hope to see, you think would be interesting to see? What could be on the horizon that you'd like to?
Well, I would like to see more companies stepping into the innovation space like we are. The insurance product has been pretty much homogeneous for decades. And
becoming ever increasingly expensive.
Quite so. No, the expense is a direct result of the cost of reinsurance, which is a whole other issue. If we had more time, I could spend a little bit of time on that. The fact of the matter is now there is a shortage of reinsurance capacity and there are people who want insurance and can't get it now.
Yeah, which is possibly the worst situation to be in because then you've got no ability to...
That's one of the reasons why Cinico is stepping into that space, because we recognize and the government recognizes that in the future this lack of available insurance may become more severe.
Does that... I know we're slightly over time, but if somebody is faced in that situation, they've bought their new home and they go to the likes of the private markets and the private market says, we're not taking any more coverage, Cayman's too risky, it's too flat, all those obvious reasons. Can they go to Cinico and say, I'm at I'm at a dead end. I don't know what to do.
Well, Cinico, in that regard, is operating just like the private companies. So we are open for business. We do have a finite amount of capacity available. So there can come a point where we have to say we can't do any more. But as I said, the main reason why we have gone into this space is for precisely that reason. Yeah. There are entities, there are people who are buying new homes and are having difficulty getting insurance placed. Yeah. So that's the main reason why we're in here for the short term, and for the longer term, the government recognizes that the situation may become worse rather than better.
I don't want to tout an article I wrote, but I wanted to make the point in that it would be nice if we had some sort of reserve fund for beginning to put the first loss type reserve fund for the Cayman Islands, so that makes the cost of reinsurance slightly less expensive and therefore potentially more affordable. Because it's a real problem the island faces with people, and it's not going to be a problem that's going to get any easier with climate change.
Quite so.
Well, look, we don't like to end on a slightly subdued note of that, but the conversation has been incredibly interesting. And for those who are interested in parametric insurance, there's a lot of research you can do on the web, but the principal points that, Michael, I think you're making is, if you've got interest and you want to have additional resource in times of stress, talk to your team. Go on the Cinico website and ask some questions. And you guys are open for business, right?
Certainly.
Well, look, thank you very much again, Michael, for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. We are over time as always, and apologies to our listeners for that. Just if you have any questions, do drop us an email, or you can see this show on YouTube. Just type in Money Sense Cayman and you'll see the show pop up there. With all that said, it remains to simply say thank you to all our listeners for tuning in, and encourage you to rejoin us again in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you, Simon. And studio time now by Foster's is 2 minutes after 8.
All right, class, pay attention. School is back in session, and it's time to get back to school ready with Foster's.
Foster's is embracing the school spirit with all the essentials like backpacks, stationery, lunch kits, and more.
And online, treat yourself to our blog at livewell.org.